Well, joining us now with his thoughts on the past week, the host of the WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnek. Trust you.
Coming off of a quiet week.
Yeah, I was going to say, hope you caught up on some rest after
Yeah,
Tuesday.
sure.
It was a long one. So much to break down after the election, but we want to start forward-looking here. And Trump's picks for not his cabinet, but his staff, starting with the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. What do you make of that appointment, and what will that relationship be like, would you say?
Well, it's historic. She's the first female chief of staff that we've ever had. She was a co-chair, mostly the chair, of his campaign. And so there was it's not really a surprise, actually. It's who a lot of people expected would get the nod. She's known as very serious but tough. I think her LinkedIn page says makes something like makes calm out of chaos. And so she'll do what a chief of staff needs to do, which is control who has access to the president. A chief of staff is not a secretarial position. She will have a substantive role in giving the president advice. He respects her greatly. It's not a bad pick.
Kind of a guardrail
Oh,
type
absolutely a guardrail, a gatekeeper as well for who has access.
Well, we also have Elon Musk, who is supposedly going to be an advisor with the president-elect. In addition, the president-elect talked to Zelensky, and on the same phone call was Elon Musk.
Yeah, did that give away anything? Like maybe Elon would have a bit of a role here when he puts him on the phone. Now, look, Trump also likes to kind of, be braggadocious a bit. So there was a part of it which I'm sure said, hey, Elon, come on the phone. I'm talking to Zelensky.
Right.
But on the other hand, Elon has a lot of business deals with Putin, with Russia. So here's the point. He's going to have to remain a sort of unofficial advisor because if he gets something which requires an appointment, there is so much conflict with his business interest, he's not going to want to deal with it. So I think my guess is that you're going to see Musk involved in almost everything, but almost from an informal capacity dealing with the president. But he'll be very powerful. Keep an eye too on who's looking at for the Attorney General position. Potentially Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, Senator Mike Lee, and then remember Matt Whitaker, who was acting Attorney General for about a minute and a half.
Right around the Jeff Sessions period.
When we learned during the January 6th, you handle water issues, go handle the water issue. We'll call you. Yeah, so kind of messy stuff, but we'll see who he picks for that. What's really going to be interesting is Secretary of State. He looks like he's looking at Marco Rubio,
yes,
who's been very active and wanting to perhaps move on. Apparently, word is Trump's having a lot of people come out of the woodworks for a lot of appointments. At the other hand, it's being reported by some that there's also not a lot of people raising their hands to have a lot of cabinet positions. Remember, he had a habit of firing people by tweet and stuff, and I think people are hesitant about that.
All right, so Paul, the White House, the Senate go Republican, maybe even the House.
The House Republicans, by the current numbers, Republicans are about 5 members away from taking it. Democrats are 15 seats away. The odds are in favor that Republicans will maintain control.
That's a
of
lot
the
of
House.
power for a Trump agenda.
It's unchecked power.
Yeah.
It's literally unchecked power. That means when the president wants it, because here's the thing, even in a normal era, we might say that you had a Senate and a House that would say, we have a role here. We even if it's the same party, we are a check on the president. He's got to sort of interact with us. You don't have that here. You have both the Senate and the House have completely capitulated to President Trump. He will control it all. And so anything he does from day one on, he will have their support. I might eat my words, but I really don't expect you'll see nary a Republican ever challenge the president in the Senate or the House. He'll get what he wants.
But there is talk that some of the Republicans may go against what he says.
Well, in the Senate, you have 2 Republicans, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. The thought is that they're a little more independent, they're Republicans, but they're more independent thinking, which is why in the Senate, which right now stands 52 Republicans, they wouldn't mind getting there's still a couple of undecided seats. So the Republicans have to say in the Senate, well, we could lose those 2. They sometimes go with the Democrats, and then we're back in that sort of tie position. So they're hoping perhaps to get one or 2 more left. Jackie Rosen from Nevada, that's been called. Yes. She's the Democrat who got a second term. So that was an issue for quite a long time. We'll see. And King from Maine, who is Angus King, who's an independent. He generally votes with the Democrats. So he was called today as well as winning. Yes.
Talking about checks and balances, there is some serious talk to protect the liberal voices on the Supreme Court by somehow moving Justice Sotomayor out of her position. What do you make of that, and how would that happen?
Well, there's only one way Justice Sotomayor, Ray, moves out of her position. She says, I'm moving out of my position. Let's remember the pressure that was put on Ruth Bader Ginsburg when even President Obama brought Ginsburg to the White House and basically said in his wonderful way, you gotta go. She didn't do it. She wanted to stay. I expect, I don't know, nobody knows, I expect Sotomayor isn't going to go anywhere either. If she is going to go anywhere, it has to be fast. The term has already started. She didn't announce it at the end of the last term. So there's really only about 70 plus days to do anything about it. It can be done. They replaced Ginsburg in minutes. So it can be happened, but I don't think so. And what's more likely to happen in a new term is that Clarence Thomas, who's not far from 80, and Alito, who I think is 76, expect both of them to retire and then have Trump appoint a couple of much younger 50-year-old type, very conservative voices. And then you have of 5, or if you include Roberts, 6 very conservative voices. That's a powerful court. And this is the court that's turned political.
And what I didn't understand is Sotomayor has health issues, and that was the big
That is what's true.
concern.
It's not just her age. She's
Yeah.
only about 70, about 70. But yes, there are health issues with her. She's okay, but that's why the
diabetic,
Democrats are.
yeah.
She's diabetic, and that's part of it. And I think it's sort of it would really be nice if we, the Democrats, could put a younger person on the court. I don't think it's going to happen.
The special counsel's case winding down now, but there are still other cases
Yeah.
that are still up in the air. Now that President-elect Trump is going to take control again, what do you foresee happening?
Well,
with
Jack
this?
Smith already knows. Trump has already said he's fired in 2 seconds. So
Right.
Jack Smith met with the judge Chutkan today, basically saying, please get rid of all deadlines here. It's clear. The handwriting's on the wall. It's over. There will never be a trial on January 6th. There will never be a trial on the Mar-a-Lago case. Never going to happen. What will happen, most likely, is that Jack Smith will draft a report. And then Merrick Garland should let that report go public. Now, Republicans don't want that to happen. They've threatened to call Jack Smith in and have him testify. Trust me, that's the last thing they want. So there will likely be a report. It will likely go public, but that's how this whole thing ends. Republicans will put down the report, and Democrats will do very little with it, but that's really that's all going to happen. In New York, there is a criminal case where he's scheduled to be sentenced on the 26th of this month. On the 12th of this month, the judge there said, I will decide whether that immunity decision by the Supreme Court takes this away from me. I think the odds are probably 50-50, but he decides, no, it doesn't take it away from me. I will sentence. And on the 26th, he will either decide, because Trump is on his way to the presidency, either a slap on the wrist, something that Trump can certainly finish before he ever takes office, or at most he would say, okay, I am going to give you whatever, jail time, but it's not going to come into play until after you're out of office.
Right.
I really doubt he's going to do that. It's all over.
Closer to home, though, we can't ignore the fact that the city council and the property taxes, they're coming together. They
know what?
want an early vote.
I have had some background conversations with some aldermen. You're absolutely right. In fact, as you know, they've called for a special meeting this coming week on Wednesday, basically to take a vote. They haven't even had the hearings yet, but they're going to take a vote. They're going to kill the budget, according to what I'm hearing from aldermen and or older persons, and they will kill the budget. And basically, that means you all got to go back to the drawing board and figure out what it means. And how they do that remains to be seen. Look for requests for staffing cuts. Look for budget cuts, but it'll be that kind of thing.
If we're watching Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, what are we going to see?
Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, you'll be seeing, I don't know what, because I'm on Sunday morning at 9 o'clock.
I
But on
said-
Sunday morning,
Okay, we got it.
That
you
was a
will
good
see me
course
on people-
correction.
But people to people on Saturday at 6:30, you will
Yeah.
see me on that. But on Sunday morning at 9, I will have Congressman Mike Quigley, who's going to come in and talk about how Democrats negotiate working in a Senate or in a government they have no power in. And then former Congresswoman Marie Newman will join me, and we'll have her with Aaron Del Mar, who was with us on election night.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to have each of them talk about how did the election end up where it did and where's it all going. Next Wednesday on the midday, I'll be interviewing author-journalist John Alter. You might know John from his books on Carter. He just wrote a book which is half autobiography and half he sat through the entire Trump trial in New York. So we'll take a look at that.
good.
And yeah, John's very outspoken, so we'll talk.
We know when you're on, Paul. I know. I just
Oh, I know. It actually helped me, like, by having to repeat it again. It's an extra
Sunday
boost.
morning,
It's an extra
9
boost.
o'clock.
Saturday, too.
Have a
Yeah,
good weekend, my
and Saturday
friend.
at 6:30, people to people.